My mother came over to this country with her father for two reasons. She was 10 years old. My grandmother and the two other siblings of my mother stayed in the small town in Italy. So my grandfather brought my mother to keep house for him while he worked, but also to get a job herself, as they were saving money to buy a home to bring the rest of the family over. And that meant for over 2 decades, my mom worked in the Endicott Johnson shoe factory in Endicott, New York, doing piecework on a sewing machine with heavy pieces of leather, making shoes. And that would haunt her the rest of her life. By the time I was born, her hands were almost crippled. She went through a series of surgeries that were not as sophisticated as they are now, for things like carpal tunnel. And there were times that she couldn't grab whatever she was holding on to, so we moved to plastic glasses and paper plates because she was always dropping the plastic, the glass, and the dishes and everything. And at one point she had surgery in both hands at the same time, and she was pretty well incapacitated. And everybody else in the family, we were all male. So Italian males don't know how to make beds, don't know how to dust, don't know how to wash dishes, don't know how to do anything like that. So my mom had to hire someone to come in to help her. And my mom hired a Mrs. Ora Guttner. And before she arrived, my mom took my brothers and I aside and said, Mrs. Guttner is going to work here. She's going to help me. She's going to become part of the family. She's going to eat her meals, her lunches with us. And if I'm not around, you're going to treat her with the respect you had better treat me with. And I'll find out if you don't. So she made that pretty clear. So I met Mrs. Guttner. She was Creole from New Orleans. Her husband was a big, tall guy who smelled just like my father because they were both working men and they had that working man scent. They sweated when they worked. And that was the connection I saw with my dad. They didn't have any children. And Mrs. Guttner really loved my brothers and I, loved being around us. And I, of course, was her favorite because I was the cutest of all 4 of us siblings. So one day my mom said, when you get up, make sure you comb your hair, put on clean clothes. You're going somewhere. And there was Mr. and Mrs. Guttner. They were going to take me for the day. Mrs. Guttner had found out that in the 10 years of my life I had never ridden on an L. My family always took buses or streetcars even in those days. So I was going to take my first L ride to the Guttner house. And then we were going to have a lunch there. Then we were going to go over to 47th and Damon to what was then the biggest fair in the city. It was the Back of the Yards Free Fair. And Back of the Yards was a community organization that Saul Alinsky had founded to bring people of different races and different ethnic groups together on that part of the south side of the city. And I had never been to a fair before, but I had read about it in school, so I was looking forward to the balloons and the Ferris wheels and the candy and the food and everything else. And my mom gave me a few bucks. She said, this is for an emergency, and this is if you want something just for yourself, you use this money. You don't let the Guttners pay for it. They'll pay for the food and everything else, but this, you don't want them to spend any more of their money. And you do whatever they say and have a great time with them. So I remember getting out in the L, and it was like a ride. It wasn't like the transportation, looking at all the buildings as we were going south and then going underground downtown, coming up on the other side. I don't know where we got off, the Yell. I don't know what neighborhood I was in, but it was very different to where I grew up around Belmont and Broadway. This was a very different neighborhood. And we walked into an apartment building and we had to walk up 5 flights of stairs to get to their apartment. And all the smells of things cooking from all the apartments was something I still remember. And we went to the fair. And so here's this little 10-year-old white kid with one hand being held by this big, strong black man and the other by this beautiful, beautiful black woman, having the time of his life. I'll never forget that opportunity I have. And now as I look back on it, I can't thank my mother enough for what she gave me. Not once did she ever say anything about, now be careful, look around, it's dangerous, it's not safe. She didn't say anything like that. All I knew was Mr. and Mrs. Guntner were people just like my mom and dad. They just happened to be a different color skin. That's all. And there was never a moment of any doubt or anything that I should worry about except making sure the Guntners gave a good report back to my mom about how I behaved. That was all I had to worry about. And then I realized another time when Mrs. Guntner was there washing the kitchen dishes, and my mom's sister came in, and my mom said, let's all sit and have coffee. So Mrs. Guntner got 3 cups that she had just washed and put them on the table, and my mom got the coffee. Before she could pour the coffee, my aunt took her cup and she re-washed it in the sink. And I even remember saying as a kid to Mom, was her cup dirty? And Mom said, that's just your aunt. We are living in incredible times right now, and the scriptures speak to those times. They really and truly do. In the first reading, the prophet Isaiah says, observe what is right. Look around, see what's the right way to act with all that's happening in our society. And do what is just. Do the right thing. God's justice is revealed, not through lightning bolts in the sky, but through the simple faith that is lived by simple, good people. And Isaiah says, it's not just all for us. Foreigners are going to join themselves to the Lord as well. And the Jewish people thought they were the chosen people. They were God's people. They were the only ones. And Isaiah is beginning to change that mentality. Foreigners, people not like us, but they are like us because we're all God's children. And Paul to the Romans, wily Paul says, I'm speaking to you Gentiles. That's my job. I'm the apostle of the Gentiles, basically, he's saying. I'm speaking to you to shove those others who think they're the chosen one, that God's message, God's love, God's justice is for every single human being, because we are all children of God. And then comes the beautiful gospel. Some would say beautiful? Yes, beautiful gospel. But Jesus, what does he say? It's not right to take the fruit of the children and throw it to the dogs? Is he calling this woman a dog? This woman comes to her. She's got a child that is ill. She's heard about this guy. He's got a reputation. He feeds people. He heals people. He raises people from the dead. She comes to him, and he challenges her faith. That's why he says it. Because everybody standing around the Lord is saying, this is a Canaanite woman. She is less than human. She doesn't deserve what this Messiah, what this miracle worker, what this teacher has to give to her. Who even let her come up here and talk? That's what they were thinking. And Jesus says what he says, and you can see him smiling. Jesus gets what they think. But then the woman looks Jesus right in the eyes looks Jesus right in the eyes and says, even the dogs get scraps. And at that moment, Jesus must have smiled a big smile, embraced it. You got it. You got it. The faith is for everyone. And your faith was just tested. She didn't walk away. She didn't turn and give him the finger as she walked away. She wasn't that angry. She didn't give up. What she did was she challenged the Lord. It's time for us to do the same thing, to challenge the Lord. To say, hey, Lord, these are difficult moments. They really are. You know, we're sitting here trying to deal with these things, and it's 120 degrees out west, and somewhere there are killer hornets going after people, and we hear on the news lies after lies after lies, and we realize how people's lives have been torn apart by injustice, not just in the current moment, but systemic injustice, systemic prejudice, systemic hatred that has gone on not even just for decades, but for hundreds of years, part of the heritage of our very country. And we're trying to work on it, and it's not easy. And we can just lift our hands up and say, there's nothing we can do about it. But yes, there is. It is those acts of kindness, those ways that we support one another, the ways we share the gifts that God has given to us, the ways we realize the blessings that God has given to each one of us are not something we've earned or even something we deserve, but it becomes a challenge for us to share those blessings and those gifts with others. Sometimes that's easy to do. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes other people's actions may anger us or frighten us. But still we see God's loving presence in them. Our response may not be somebody else's response, but our response must be the response that God calls us to have, just as everybody's response should be that as well. And so don't for a second downplay acts of kindness. Don't for a second downplay being generous. Don't for a second think my voice, my signature, my action won't make a difference. It will, and it does. That's why, despite everything that's happened, we've gerrymandered a church so you can come here, so you could be here. It's important to realize we are not alone in this. Each and every one of us is a child of God. We come together, and the moment we're here, we are the family of God. Not just for the moment we're here, when we walk out the doors of these church, the doors of this church, we share that loving presence of the Lord with others. There's no way we can walk out of the doors of this church with the Eucharist, with God's loving presence in our heart, and not be compelled to speak out, to act, to share, to challenge, to do what God is calling us to do in the moment. And the beautiful thing is, that very Eucharist we share, that very presence of God, will and does strengthen us. My mother's faith was a simple faith. She had no idea at all what that one day would mean to me, how it spoke to me, about how I was to treat people in my lives, and the beauty we can see in each and every one of us. The beauty not only of the individual, but the beauty of God's presence in each and every one of us. And that's the kind of gift we need to share with each other, with the children who are here, with our neighbors, in the workplace. When somebody comes to us and does nothing but complain or say things that are negative, we've got to be the other person who says, all of us, there's no such thing as a foreigner. All of us, there's no such thing as a heretic. They're all of us. There's no such thing as a Canaanite. All of us, brothers, sisters, children of God. And that's how the difference is going to be made. Each of us in our small ways that come together and are celebrated here as God's way, the way of the Lord. Make straight the way of the Lord. This is the time. This is what we're supposed to be. This is what we are called to do and be. And maybe as we get tired of all this stuff, let this be a badge. Let it say, I'm going to do what the Lord calls me to do. I'm going to do what I can do for my sisters and brothers as best I can each and every day. And I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make. I don't know if anybody's going to notice it, if it's going to change anybody else's life. I trust it will. But know it's what God is compelling me to do. Make straight the way of the Lord. Let's do it. We're already doing it. But let's not give up. This is not the time to give up.